It looks like a lot of our friends have joined us though, so we'll go ahead and get started at 6:30. I want to say thank you for joining us today. I am Alicia Brewster, and I'm the program director here at Sustaining Way. We want to welcome you to our open house event tonight. I'll be your host for tonight. So I want to kick off by just telling you a little bit about Sustaining Way. We're an interfaith nonprofit that educates, demonstrates, and collaborates to empower South Carolina communities to cultivate a sustainable future. Our base of operations and educational center is located in Nicholtown. Our flagship project, Annie's House, is an affordable, highly energy efficient home surrounded by an urban garden. Everything we do is in an effort to care for people and the environment in a sustainable way. Our open house today was organized in remembrance and celebration of Juneteenth. It's the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States on June 19th. Sustaining Way also works to share the history of the Nicholtown community and its residents. Our guest speaker tonight, we're really excited to have Dr. Grady Butler. He protested with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the 1960s. And he will help kick off our Juneteenth by sharing George Washington Carver's journey from slavery to emancipation. There will also be performances by local spoken word artists Chauncey Beatty and Moody Black. Now, let's talk about the significance. Why are we coming together for Juneteenth? As Rick mentioned earlier, this is something that we had planned over a month ago. We knew that Juneteenth was coming, and every month we have an open house event. And because Juneteenth is such a significant date in our history, but very few, including myself and my own family, really celebrate its significance, we felt like this was a great opportunity for us to highlight Juneteenth and really be able to look at more of Nicholtown's history. We had a wonderful event last month where Sylvia Palmer talked about Nicholtown's history, and that was something that a lot of people found very interesting, and we wanted to continue that conversation. Well, lo and behold, we decided that we would talk about Juneteenth and recognize again Nicholtown history. However, one of the challenges, my naive thinking that I would be able to maybe make some connections between the people who lived in the Nicholtown community, really on the plantation that was here in the 1800s, and be able to see what their journey was from being held in bondage into emancipation. That history is not here. It's not readily available. We can't find it. However, we are able to recognize the fact that we all have a shared history and that we should celebrate that. But we do know about several very strong forces who made that transition from bondage into emancipation. And we want to highlight those people and continue to search to find information about those who we don't currently know about. Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day. It's the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States on June 19th, 1865. More than 2 years before that, though, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, which made known, and many of us know this, that all enslaved people, but it was only in the Confederate States, in rebellion against the Union would be free. So in reality, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't instantly free any slaves because it only applied to places under Confederate control and not to slave-holding border states or rebel areas already under Union control. However, as Northern troops began to advance into the Confederate South, many slaves were able to flee behind Union lines. In Texas, there was very little in the Civil War battles. Really, the state was not really affected. There was not a presence of Union troops there. So many slave owners, even from the southern states, viewed Texas as a safe haven, and they moved there. They moved their slaves there. And so it wasn't until after the war came to a close in the spring of 1865 that a general by the name of General Granger and his troops arrived in Texas. And June is when he signaled to the 50,000 plus slaves who were still there in bondage that they were now free. So celebrations began to break out among the newly freed slaves, and Juneteenth was born. That December, slavery in America was officially abolished or formally abolished with the adoption of the 13th Amendment. Juneteenth celebrations and commemorations typically will feature music, barbecues, prayers, and other activities. And as Blacks migrated from Texas to other parts of the country, the Juneteenth tradition spread. And then in 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. And today, most states do observe Juneteenth. Now, as the nation experiences violence and unrest following the killing of George Floyd, and really a long history of Black men, women, and children, it's evidence that we cannot go back to business as usual. We must stop and really address this legacy of slavery that even after the abolishment of slavery still plagues our country and still terrorizes Black people and has so for the past 400 years. Yesterday, as Rick alluded to, we released a public statement that, and I'll summarize this, Sustaining Way stands together with others across the nation in our expressions of outrage and demands for change. The impact of systemic racism spans the history of our country, and we must be intentional and committed to the work of exposing that history, addressing inequities, and creating an inclusive and just future that's distinct from the past. As Sustaining Way continues our efforts to cultivate a sustainable and equitable future for all, we will prioritize efforts to combat racism in our communities. And these actions will include providing a platform for us to tell our stories through our open house events, combating racial disparities in the communities that we serve, and organizing a Get Out to Vote campaign in partnership with South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light and others to provide the resources and help that's necessary to make voting a safe reality for everyone. Now, this time, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. We are really just honored to have her here with us, Chauncey Beatty. She is a dear friend and just a powerful woman. And I want to read a short bio. She has a very long bio because she's done just some amazing things in the time that she's been here with us. But with nearly 20 years in the field of personal transformation and organizational development, Chauncey Beatty is an award-winning poet, a TEDx speaker, a business strategist for talent-based entrepreneurs, a certified life coach, and a master facilitator. She's the founder of the 7th annual Ready Women Retreat and the Daughtering Project, a social movement that promotes healthy relationships between mothers and their daughters. Chauncey is most known for her ability to do transformational heart work, something that's needed desperately right now. She creates safe spaces for individuals and organizations to speak their deepest truth, be heard, and to create a new possibility for the future. Chauncey has been featured on NBC, CBS, Fox, and Google TV and its affiliate broadcast stations with the Greater Than AIDS campaign, a movement sponsored by the Kaiser Foundation aimed to elevate the public's knowledge and understanding of HIV/AIDS. Her image is used in print ads and on billboards across the country with the slogans, "My life is worth protecting," and "Speak up for yourself." As a guest on Michael Eric Dyson's show, interviewed by Oscar-winning actress Monique on Clear Channel Communication, and featured as the centerfold ad in Heart and Soul magazine for February 2011, and in Essence magazine's 2012 edition with Barack Obama on the cover. Chauncey was also a featured artist on season 1 of the TV1's hit show, Verses and Flow. Host Hill Harper compared her to the poet, scholar, and activist Nikki Giovanni. Chauncey earned a Bachelor of Arts from Winthrop University in psychology and a Master of Arts in Humanities in African American and African Studies from the Ohio State University. Chauncey is a dynamic member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and a native of Greenville, South Carolina. We are we just feel privileged to have you with us, and also to know that you are one of Greenville's very own. So thank you, Chauncey, for being with us, and thank you for sharing what's on your heart today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Sustaining Way, for your work. This work is important. So I appreciate each and every one of you, Rick Joy, Alicia Brewster, your staff, your volunteers, your board members, your steward leaders. Thank you so much for the work you do in the world. When a 46-year-old man cries out for his dead mother, his face pressed into asphalt, a knee pressed into his neck, one has to wonder if, during the March on Washington, when Black men painted their humanity on white picket signs, 4 words as declaration of their viability, I am a man, did you see them? In all of these years, post-transatlantic trade, post-Ma'afa, post-Nader, post-Jim Crow, post-civil rights, post-WEB, post-Booker, post-Martin, post-Malcolm, post-Ella, post-Fannie Lou, post-Shirley, post-Jesse, post-Black Power, post-Huey and Bobby, post-Barack, post your supposed post-racial America, was time not enough of a mirror for you? Honestly, America, what do you see when you stare at yourself? Are you proud? Is it empty? Is it love? Is it the self you sought to grow with the seeds you planted 400 years ago? 400 years of watering, of hate, of sun, of oppression, of sweat and toil, labor not of your own. I imagine you are truly afraid to really look. You are afraid. You are afraid of our good brothers. Brothers like Nat Turner, brothers like John Brown. You still call him crazy, and yet you have failed to recognize what your crazy is doing to you. But see, we are the children of Nat Turner and John Brown. We are very well alive. We are fearless and sane and swelling the streets of America. This is how fires are started. This is how buildings are burnt down. This is how raiding and looting and riots and rebellions and protests and yes, even revolutions happen. A candle lighting another candle, a black body falling before its time, a voice saying it is enough, a sea of bodies as resistance. This is the spark. It is before the flames that a fire is started. It is not when the people are overflowing in rage, a Molotov cocktail of hopelessness and anger, broken windows that can and will be repaired. It is when a pandemic reaches its tipping point and turns into pandemonium. And pandemonium is defined as the capital of hell. Perhaps that's what we are, and the harvest of American sin. When our only job as human is to love, and the only measure of love is selflessness. But see, even love, when angry enough, when love is aware that you are not listening, when love knows that you do not see him despite his many pleas and requests, will flip over your table, will damage your property and tear down the idols that you have built. See, this is what the protest is about. The body as temple, sacred, home for God. George Floyd was a home for God, and you killed him. How many temples of God will you destroy before you see humanity? Before you see our signs, I am a man, ain't I a woman, I am human. But maybe now that your table is turned onto the floor, you will see us. I have, uh-oh, can y'all hear me? Hopefully. Okay. I have the great privilege to announce our guest speaker for today. And Alicia has shared some of his bio, but I just want to share a little bit more. Reverend Dr. Butler is a native of Greenville, South Carolina. He is a graduate of Sterling High School, of Tuskegee University, of the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where he earned his Doctor of Ministry in Pastoral Care and Counseling. He is a longtime educator and advocate of Black excellence. As the Dean of Students at Morehouse, he was also a professor at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta. He served as a Board of Trustees member on the Greenville County School Board. He's also served as a community organizer, but most notably, Dr. Butler protested and demonstrated throughout the Southeast during the Civil Rights Movement, and he served time in jail with Dr. Martin Luther King after being arrested for eating at a restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia. He has pastored many churches, but also our own church here in Greenville at Nicholtown Presbyterian Church. And he is the shoulders. He is the person, the legacy that we are standing on. And so it is such an honor. It is a privilege to be able to hear his voice, his perspective, and to have him share with us today. I also want to share that I asked him directly, what did he believe his work was in the world? And he said that his greatest hope was to make this place a better place for each and every one of us. So at this time, I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Grady Butler.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir.
You can? Okay. I'm honored to be here today to join you in the celebration. But let me first of all add my word of thanks to Sustainable Way of at least raising their voice, raising its voice in the protests of the terrible tragedies that are going on in our world today. And I just might add, in words of Dr. King, if we don't learn to live together, we're going to perish, all of us, as fools. And I just hope and pray that somehow or another, we will wake up and stand up and try to clean up some of this terrible stuff that's going on. Okay, I'm going to today give a brief survey of the life and work of Dr. George Washington Carver. Fortunately, I had an opportunity to attend Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University, which houses the George Washington Carver Museum. And also there is the legacy of Dr. Carver still very much alive at Tuskegee. So let me begin by saying he was one of the world's most productive and greatest scientists. As I was doing the research, a lot of the people want to refer to him as a great Black scientist. I hope we're going to one day get over the fact that a person can be great, just be great, and not have to add a prefix that they're Black. But he was one of the world's greatest and most productive scientists. He was born in slavery, according to many resources, as in July 1864. And that was a year before the Emancipation Proclamation, in Diamond, Missouri, or a place right outside. His parents were Giles and Mary Carver. And of course, he died in Tuskegee on January the 5th, 1943. Dr. Carver was an agricultural scientist and inventor who developed hundreds of products using peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans. At Tuskegee University, is where he made his great mark. Let's look at the man. His birth, his family, his education, his life's work, his philosophy of life, and his legacy. Of course, I've said he's born near Diamond, Missouri. According to record, he was stolen as an infant with his mother and recovered by his owner, Moses Carver, in exchange for a horse. That was the deal. To get him back, that he had to give away one of his best horses. So in a sense, the man's life was considered no more than being traded for a horse. Well, he grew up in knowing little about his mother and father. Of course, his father died in an accident before he was born. Moses Carver and his wife raised young George and his brother James as their own children. It was very interesting as I looked at a lot of research that wasn't an uncommon thing in that day for a young black boy to be taken in by a white family and raised. So they raised and taught them to read and write, which was significant because, as you know, in slavery, it was against the law to teach a slave to read and write. At an early age, George took on an interest in plants and soil conditioning. He later became known as the plant doctor by local farmers. At 11 years old, he left the farm to attend an all-black school. He was disappointed at this school, and so he moved to Kansas about 2 years later. And then in the next 10 years, it was interesting to me how he did it. He moved from town to town in the Midwest. And of course, in Kansas, in the Midwest, he graduated, however, from high school in Kansas in 1880 and applied to Highland College. And one of the interesting things was he was accepted, but later denied because he was black. That was a terrible situation that used to happen in the early days of a person applying to a place, and once they arrive, they're denied when they see that they're black. But because another white couple, however, befriended him, and this was one of the great things I think that happened throughout the United States, is that there was some compassionate white people. I hope we had many more of those today. It's amazing to me how so many sit by and do nothing, say nothing. And George Washington Carver found himself befriended by white couples. He later enrolled at Simpson College. And that was where he was accepted. He first started art and piano. And I just might pause to say here that there was no end to his talents. He was not only a great scientist and a great inventor, but he was a musician. He was a painter, an artist. He was a musician, as I say, musician, a Bible scholar. There's no end, and probably many more things that we don't have record of. But he first started playing the piano and art. But one of the professors at Simpson heard him talk about some of his interests and concerns about plants and flowers. He was so impressed. So he said to him after this, he said, you need to change your major. And after he did that, he moved into the area to study plants and flowers. In 1884, he was the first Black to earn a Bachelor of Science degree from Simpson College. And later, in 1896, earned a master's degree. Isn't that something? One of the things to take note of is how this young man overcame the odds. He didn't let stumbling blocks stop him. If he couldn't make it in one way, he would try another. And I think that should be noted. This was in 1894, achieving a Bachelor of Science degree, and in 1896, a master's degree. Well, once he received his master's degree and information began to be disseminated of some of his skills, he began to get offers. So he was offered a position by Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee Institute, my alma mater. And that's where a lot of good things started to happen. Now let's look at his life's work for a minute or two. He spent his entire professional, life at Tuskegee. However, I was not there. He died in 1943, and I was still in elementary school. But I did know people and discuss with people of this great man's life. As a matter of fact, one of my really dear friends who graduated in 1943 knew him personally, worked with him. And of course, we had a lot of conversation about him. But early, when he got to Tuskegee, Dr. Booker T. Washington wanted him to be in the classroom. He wanted him to be an education person. Dr. Carver felt his calling to be in research, and he wanted to spend his time in the laboratory. So that created some early frictions between Carver and Dr. Booker T. Washington. I did not know that until I began to do some close-up research. So somehow they managed, Dr. Washington felt that Dr. Carver was so important to Tuskegee and to the world, he kept him there because of what he had to offer. And they worked out some kind of way of at least tolerating each other. But Dr. Booker T. Washington died in 1915. And after that, I mean, he felt relieved, he felt free. And the president that came on behind him, Dr. Moulton, Robert Russell Moulton, he took the pressure off of him for teaching and gave him the freedom and the latitude to stay in the laboratory and stay in his lab and do the work. So he spent his efforts in research. One of the great things that he did in his research was crop rotation. He showed the farmers of Alabama how to rotate their crops and how more productive it would be when they would do it. And he also invented what they called the Jessup wagon, the movable school. He would take the classroom or the teaching thing into the community. And of course, they still have some of that around Tuskegee. The picture of the movable school, the wagon, and so forth and so on. But during the time that they rotated the crops, one of the things that happened, they found out that peanuts began to flourish. They got an overabundance of peanuts. And so Dr. Carver began to find use for the peanuts. And it's well known that he began to make all kinds of things from the peanut. As a matter of fact, some 300 plus products came from the peanut. As a matter of fact, during the time, I think it was in the 30s, that he had some peanut oil that he prescribed as good for, I don't know, for cancer or something, deadly disease, and many other things he developed from that peanut. You can go online and find them, but it's 300 of them. All kinds of ink, oils, all kinds of things. Well, they did not, the world or the nation in the world didn't receive some of his inventions very well, and they played down. So he got a chance in 1921 to go before the Ways and Means Committee of the United States in Washington. I could imagine that was something else. And I understand when he made his presentation, he got a standing ovation, and he got an approval for a tariff that supported the program that he was fostering. Now, I don't want to go too long, but let's look at the next 20 years real quick. The next 20 years of his life, he lived as a sort of modest celebrity. Now, Dr. Washington, from all indications, all that I learned, was a very humble man, strong and determined, but humble and smart, of course. And he had a passion for helping people. He shunned the limelight, and I'm going to tell a little story at the end. And he was not materialistic at all. He wore old clothes. As a matter of fact, he made his own clothes. And that's why I say there's so many talents that you can't even list all of them. But I like his philosophy of life. His passion was to help the people who were farthest down. And I understand that there were many corporations and many groups offered him great salaries and all kinds of positions throughout the nation and the world. But Dr. Carver decided, no, I'm going to stay at Tuskegee. Now, I did not mention very much the religious side of Carver, but he taught a Bible class. He was very, very religious. On occasions, he said he would go in his laboratory, lock the door, and pray to God to give him the answer to whatever he was seeking in his discovery. And he wouldn't come out until he got it. Isn't that something? And I understand this was really true. He would lock himself in the laboratory and pray and ask God to show him the answer to whatever he was seeking. Now, finally, his legacy. Well, he was one who felt that you should take what you have and do what you were supposed to do. He has this poem. I didn't get a chance to pick it up, and it started off talking about figure it out for yourself, my lad. Some of you heard it. You have 2 eyes, two hands, 2 feet, and what he was really saying was, use what you have. A lot of people complain about, I don't have this, I can't do this, and I wasn't born with this. He said, use what you have. Figure it out and do it. Now, I want to close with just two little stories. The first one was one time when he got famous, uh, he was asked to come up north to make a presentation to one of the big scientists meetings. And so a group got together and decided that they wanted him to look good and to be real, to represent them well. So they came in his office and said, Dr. Carver, we decided that you're going up to this big meeting, represent us, and we want you to look really good. So we decided that we're going to give you the opportunity to go down to the best clothing store and buy the best suit, whatever. It doesn't make no difference about what it costs. Let's get a good outfit. And we want you to go up looking good. I said, Dr. Carver listened to them well, and then he said, well, I know you want me to look good, said, but now it looks like you're more interested in the clothes than you are in what I have to offer. I tell you what, I've got a new suit that I just made. Haven't even put it on yet. I tell you what, just send that suit up there and I'll stay home. I thought that was something else. And he told me, he said, if you're thinking that clothes makes the man, he said, I think you got another song coming. So I think they, of course, they scrapped that idea of him sending the suit. But the final thing I want to say is, he's kind of a sickly person. He was very frail. And I understand that on one occasion, he went to the doctor and the doctor gave him medication and whatever, and it didn't improve his health. Guess what? He went in the lab and fixed his own medicine. And I understand that that medicine worked better than the medicine of the doctors. And I just wanted to close by saying it was a joy. My daddy went down when I graduated from Tuskegee, and when he walked in the Carver Museum, he told the rest of the family, he said, y'all need to go on because I'm going to be here for a while. Daddy didn't want to leave. We had to drag him out of there because when he saw all of the things that he had done, all of his inventions and all of his work, and of course, my daddy was kind of a man too of many talents. But I want to say to whomever's listening, if you ever get a chance, please go to Tuskegee, go to the George Washington Carver Museum, and you will never regret it. Because I think this man left a legacy that the world should be proud of, and the world should never cease to give it recognition and give it a place in history. Finally, I knew the place. He lived in Dorothy Hall. I had a chance to know he come out of Carver Museum, go around and come in Dorothy Hall. He became so weak in his old age, they built an elevator in Dorothy Hall. It's now the Kellogg Center, Conference Center. But that I went and saw the elevator, took him up to his room, and also went to his room. That's where he spent his last days. So I'm pleased and privileged to share this moment. There's so much you can talk about Dr. Carver. This is just starting. But anyway, that was the life and some of the life and the work of the great man, Dr. George Washington Carver. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was such an interesting sharing of Dr. George Washington Carver's life. And I've read in books before, and I've heard other people talk about George Washington Carver in the past, but I would say that you are also a person with many, many gifts, because I think that this was probably the most memorable story that I've ever heard about Dr. Washington's, George Washington Carver's life. So thank you so much. That was wonderful, Dr. Butler.
Okay.
I will say that we asked a couple of different people about sharing. One of the last people I spoke with was Representative Chandra Dillard, because we knew we wanted to highlight the Nicholtown community. And she said, I'm not the best person to speak about Nicholtown, about our history, but we have some really great members of our community who can do a much better job than I can. And of course, Dr. Grady Butler was one of the names that was mentioned, and thankfully, we appreciate you for sharing with us about yourself. Dr. Butler is from the Nicholtown community, so he was born, raised here, and we're just so blessed to have you back in the community. So thank you for sharing. Right. One of the things I do want to share, and we also want to take questions from the audience. If you can see my screen, I wanted to just share a couple of pictures of the connection between George Washington Carver and our community. This may be a little bit difficult to see right now, but maybe you can see. So there are 3 or 4 streets in Nicholtown that were named in honor of George Washington Carver. So there's Carter Street.
Which one?
Carter Street.
You said Carter or Carver?
Let's see here. I'm sorry, Carver. I apologize. So let's go back. All right, we have.
To my knowledge, there's not a Carver Street in Nicholtown.
There's Carter. I'm sorry.
Carter. It's a Carter Street.
Carter Street, let's see, Quarter Way. And I believe there's another street that was named in honor of George Washington Carver in the Nicholtown community. And Yvonne Reeder, I know that you're on the call and you may have a little bit more information about that, but we thought that was very interesting and tried.
Yeah, that was, it says Carter Street, but if you look at their tax records, it says Carver subdivision.
Okay.
Really?
And then, yeah, on the tax record shows Carver subdivision. And then there's Tuskegee Street, which is after Carver.
Yeah, I know that.
Associated. And then there's Porter Court, which has to do some kind of way with Tuskegee. I don't know.
There's a Washington Court, and I know.
Yep, and there's Washington Court. But yeah, that's called Carver Heights. Where Tuskegee Street is on your tax record, it says Carver Heights.
Really?
Yeah, pull up anybody's address on there.
Carver Heights?
Yeah, it says Carver Heights. It doesn't say Nicholtown. It says Carver Heights.
Now, where you pull that? Where you get that from?
Just pull anybody's address that lives on that street and on their tax record. You know, when you go to look at your deeds, ownership of property.
Carver Heights.
Yeah.
Carver Heights, you say?
Yeah, that's what it was called.
Huh?
Yeah, that's what it was called. That section.
That's new to me.
We're going to research that, Dr. Butler, this summer.
I'll send you a snapshot of one, okay?
Okay. I'd like to know. I'd like to see it.
Absolutely. We will actually research that. That's going to be one of the projects. We have a Stewart Youth Program during the summer for high school students, and that's actually one of the projects that I'm going to propose that one of the groups takes on, is really trying to uncover what the connection is between George Washington Carver and the Nicholtown community. And then also, because Sustaining Way, one of the areas that we focus on is sustainable agriculture. We honor George Washington Carver with one of his quotes, "Where there is no vision, there is no hope." So there's a centerpiece in the garden at Annie's house in Nicholtown in his honor. And there's also some artwork that youth in the community helped to create. So we also carry on his legacy in some of the techniques that we use, and we know that they're used all over the world, and also the words, very wise words that he shared with us. So we appreciate, again, you sharing today about his life. And at this time, we want to open up for questions for Dr. Butler. Sophia, were there any questions in the chat box?
There are currently no questions in the chat box.
I'll ask one if there's not one. I'd love to hear the story of Atlanta, Dr. Butler, when you were arrested with Martin Luther King and what happened there. Did you hear that question, Dr. Butler? And you're on mute still. I don't think we can unmute him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Now, what was the question?
So in Atlanta, early on, Chauncey mentioned that you were arrested in Atlanta with and jailed with Martin Luther King Jr. I'd love to hear the story behind that.
Oh, well, that's a long story. I'll just say in 60, I was there, and we integrated the lunch counters by protesting, and then we got arrested, went to jail, and integrated all the lunch counters in Atlanta.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rosalind, I see that you raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Facebook, and I said, hey, let me just try to jump in here and see what it's about. And I'm really just fascinated because I do a radio show every Sunday from 2 to 4, and we're always looking for content to put out there in the community, just to make people aware of things that's going on. So I would love to interview some of you all, or even all of you, because you're all great. But I didn't know a lot about this stuff. I'm a member of Allen Temple AME Church, but I just, you know, I'm new to Greenville. Well, not really new to Greenville. I've lived here a long time. I'm not really from here, but a lot of history and things like that. I do enjoy hearing these stories, and I just want to say thank you. I appreciate this, and definitely, you know, I'm going to try to get in touch with you guys so that we can put out in the community about the Juneteenth thing that's going on. I'm very interested in that myself, so I'm listening in, guys, and I'm taking down names because I'm going to be getting in touch with you. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind, and we definitely will stay in touch with you. We plan to commemorate Juneteenth by celebrating, and we will officially close business on Juneteenth. We believe that needs to be looked at as a holiday, an important holiday, just as Independence Day and other holidays are celebrated. So we hope to be able to celebrate with you and all of the festivities that virtually will be going on in the community. So we'll definitely let you know as we learn more about things that are going on around. I think there was a question or some information from Sylvia Palmer. Sylvia, did you have any remarks? Did you want to unmute and share? Okay, well, I do know Chauncey Beatty has a question.
I'm muted. There's also another question in the chat room as well, Alicia, so you can see. I have a question for Dr. Butler. Dr. Butler, what is your thoughts about how things are unfolding, the protest is unfolding, in comparison to how things unfolded with the civil rights movement?
Well, as you know, it's a different day today. Everything has changed. But I would just hope that, I would hope that ways could be made to get a lot of people involved that should be involved, but mostly in a larger scale. But it's very, very painful now for things that are going on. And it's, as I said, unless we do something quickly, we're going to go down the drain. Um, people's lives do matter. And I don't think they're going to stand by and let people just snuff out their life. And just, it was so hard, I couldn't watch it really. Them to put a man on the ground and just choke him to death, that is totally unconscionable. And I think the whole nation ought to be up in arms about doing something about this kind of stuff. I know that people who do wrong ought to be punished, but some of the stuff that I've seen is just outrageous. And I pray to God that somehow or another we will wake up before it's an everlasting, finally an everlasting too late. Because this kind of stuff will take us all under. But I think we're gonna have to change some laws. We're gonna have to make some things more stringent about people who do things, who do these outrageous things. Just like people do things, they don't even get arrested. It's just outrageous, I should say, and we need to do something about it. And it needs to start from the top all the way down, but mainly at the top.
Do you have any wisdom for protesters from the perspective of like an elder? Do you have any wisdom for people as they protest, and not just in terms of getting out in the streets, but all the ways in which we can protest against?
Yeah, well, when we were protesting in my day, and I mean, early days in 1960, of course, you had to pledge yourself. We were nonviolent. We went down, we picketed, we sat in at lunch counters and walked the streets. To think of it, really, when you think back on it, it was very, very dangerous and very risky. But we were committed to a cause. And it wasn't, it wasn't as the violence. Of course, in Birmingham, if you look back in 1963, that was really awful. Turning on those fire hoses and the dogs. That too was unconscionable. But it's just hard now. Most of my strongest effort would be to pray to God on high, because for looking at people here to do something about it, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be people in power, Supreme Court on down, they do little. They don't do so little of what they should be doing. So it's going to have to take some intervention, and I'm not talking as a preacher, only as a preacher, but I am a preacher. And unless God saves us, I think we're going to be lost. And I hope everybody who's listening will make sure that they're saved, because it may be sooner coming than we think. And I certainly want to be saved. I want to go with the Lord, because I think the Lord's going to walk through here, and it's going to be terrible. I think this coronavirus and 9/11 will be looking like a picnic. But because God, when he moves in a mighty way. And I think America needs to wake up as well as the world. That's my take on it. I pray mightily for all, and I hope that everybody will also do their praying too.
Thank you.
Dr. Butler, there's a question from the chat. It says, how do you see Black history being taught in South Carolina schools? What should teachers say to parents who request administration to excuse their children from certain assignments, especially something taught during Black History Month? And then after that question, we'll go on to Rashad's question.
Well, Black history needs to be taught as well as all history. We are people. We are people just like everybody else, whether you're white, Chinese, whatever, Mexican. one of the things I think we're going to have to come to the conclusion that we're all part of the human race. Whatever color you are, whatever your features are, we're all created by God. That's my belief, the same God, and we're all human. And like one of my mentors used to say, when they tried to make us 3/5 of a human, he said, I don't know where that comes from. How you gonna make a person 3/5 of a human? But when my blood and my bones, just like anybody else's bones, and all, so I think we're gonna have to teach the history of our people, our Black people. Black people have made so many contributions, just like George Washington Carver. All of the things they say, he saved the South, the farm industry of the South. But that's not really highlighted too much. It's just kind of spoken of lightly. But look what we have done. If you look at all the inventions of Black people, even down to the golf tee, air conditioning, the brake system, just everything. Look at Benjamin Banneker, who created the first wooden clock, first clock of wood. He laid out the city of Washington, all of the streets and all of, I mean, it's atrocious when people want to write off our history. It's just downright disgusting to me. And a person who can't see that Black history is not important, there's something wrong with them. And I feel very strongly about that.
Rashad, I think you had the next question. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just about to. Thank you. Can everyone hear me well?
I can't speak up a little louder.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay. I was just wanting to ask about the importance of boycotting and the impact that it had during your particular era in time when you all would protest.
What kind of cutting?
Boycotting?
Wood?
Boycotting.
Oh, boycotting. You said boycotting.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Who's the question directed to?
You, your experience during the time.
Oh,
you would protest,
well,
experiencing boycott.
that was one of the means of getting the attention of the people who denied us. I remember in Atlanta when I went there in '59, they were not hiring people for certain positions. And let's just take one. We couldn't be drivers of bread trucks. So the ministers decided, well, okay, you won't hire us, we won't buy your bread. So they found out when we stopped buying the bread started getting stale on the shelves. And then they called us in for a meeting and then began to offer us jobs. Boycotting is a means, a very viable means of getting people's attention. I think where you spend your money, you ought to be given recognition or given privileges. And I don't spend my money where people don't treat me right. I just don't do it. And I think anybody has that right. If somebody mistreats you, you don't need to spend your money there. And I think the boycotting is a viable, and it's been used in many instances. And of course, I think it's still very viable. If you get mistreated, don't spend your money there. We spend billions and billions of dollars in this economy. And we get very little in return in terms of respectability.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I think we had one more comment and question. Sylvia, are you able to ask or add? Oh, okay, we can't hear you. Okay, so
Tell her
Sylvia,
to go up on her picture And up at the top, it'll say unmute.
Yeah, it's already unmuted on our end.
Sylvia, are you able to type into the chat box and we can probably read off what you type into the chat box while Miss Sylvia is typing her question in so that we can try to stay on our agenda. We do have, we're really honored to have another performing artist with us today, and Rashad is actually going to introduce him, Moody Black. So this time, Rashad. You're muted. So Rashad actually was able to facilitate getting Moody Black, so he's going to introduce, I think.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
I was trying to use the microphone, but it wouldn't work. My name's Rashad, and so I was introduced to Moody Black through.
You speak up a little louder.
Yeah, can you hear me?
A little bit better.
Yeah, I was introduced to Moody Black through the Circle of Friends. So that was my first introduction to Moody Black, and from that particular moment, I knew he was outstanding, talented as a spoken artist and a performing artist. He's been a performing artist since the age of 12. He became a prominent force on the multi-regional poetry scene throughout his enthusiastic live shows and strong work ethic. When I was working with him, we was working with children at that particular time, and the passion that he gave the children and poetry and the words that he spoke through the children, they really lived out those words, and he really instilled his passion within those children. On the list of his long accomplishments, he has hosted the longest running open mic in South Carolina and National Poetry Awards 2015 Best Open Mic Venue in the nation. And they have the slogan of "Say what?"
Say what?
Many times. The open mic in Greenville, South Carolina is hosted at the Coffee Underground every Sunday, which I love to attend when I can. He has been a part of the National Poetry Awards in 2015, the Best Host of an Open Mic Venue Award, TEDx Performer 2017, GAMSDA Award for Best Poet in the Nation, Indie Fire Radio Legend Award. He's been on 107.3 Jams, Black History Pioneer, 96.3 The Block 2017 Black History Pioneer, and also in 2020 Carolina Underground Music Awards nominee for the Best Male Model. So Best Male Entrepreneur among others. So I want you all to give Moody Black a round of applause and because I'm sure he's going to put on the show for us. Thank you.
Lord, it's so hard living this life, a constant struggle each and every day. Many are blind and cannot find the truth, 'cause no one seems to really know. But I won't accept this is how it's gonna be. Devil, you got to let me and my people go. 'Cause I wanna be free, completely free. Lord, won't you come save me? My daughter once told me that every night when she go to bed, she sleep with a small picture of a little brother right beside her pillow at night. See, my daughter, she loves her little brother. Both born from different mothers, never taught my kids about being half siblings. One of my elders once taught me that God only makes people whole. Funny, when I think back in history class, textbooks say we were once considered 3/5. But on July 9th, what was supposed to be a day of hanging downtown with Daddy, I, along with my 8-year-old daughter and my 4-year-old son at the time, found ourselves in the midst of a march. Folk marching over the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, so we marching. My son, faced with 4-year-old aggression, he was Newton in spirits. He felt the energy of the crowd. Black Lives Matter screamed like a steam engine from his 4-year-old teeth. His older sister reached for his left hand to make sure he was safe as we marched with. So drawing the truth in her eye, close eye on his every step, she turned around and she asked, she said, Daddy, how come we marched? So I explained to her by asking, if your brother and I wasn't doing anything wrong, and a police officer kills only because of our color, would that make you mad and sad? And she said, yeah. So I told her that these people are marching because they don't know what else to do. They want to show the world that they're mad and sad. And deep down, I was mad and sad because Black folks still marching. So immediately, my mind flashed 10 years from now, seeing them still marching, my son, faithful 14-year-old aggression, my daughter 18 years old, still watching her brother every step, both the fists pumping, screaming for justice of the murder of the father. My mind flashed 10 more years, seeing my 28-year-old daughter still marching, holding a picture of a little brother. That same picture, she should lay beside her pillow at night. No, she'd never see him again. She's crying, the Niagara falls on her face, and she's screaming till her voice became silent. Black Lives Matter. My mind flashed 10 more years, seeing my 38-year-old daughter still marching, holding a picture of a husband, holding a picture of a son, holding a picture of a father, holding a picture of a brother. Hoping y'all get the picture. I'm hoping y'all get the picture. Every week somewhere, somebody lose a brother, lose a father. Somebody right now got a daughter going to bed with a picture of their little brother. They'll never see them again. We are mad and sad and refuse to be broken. How come we keep being reduced to being a fraction of what we're supposed to be? One of my elders once told me that God only make people whole. Then how come the police trying to 3/5 our freedom? How come Black folks still marching? We've been marching since 1942, and we are tired. And our shoes ain't got no more souls to give. That's that piece.
Thank you. That's our hope, that as Dr. Butler put it earlier, that we do something, that this changes. And we just appreciate you, Moody Black, putting that to poetry and reminding us of the work that we have to do so that our children have a better world. We owe it to them. We did get some clarification about the community that's named in honor of George Washington Carver. Sylvia Butler, who is one of our board members and a longtime Nicholtown resident, she provided a little bit of background, additional background. She says that the subdivision that we were talking about, Carter Street, Elder Street, and a portion of Gandy Street, Quarter Street, Wheatley Place, and Tuskegee Avenue. Her parents' home is on Elder Street, and the developer chose to name the subdivision to honor Dr. George Washington Carver. So thank you for giving us more information about that and about the connection, again, that Nicholtown has to George Washington Carver. So as we close out today, again, we want to recognize everyone who is on this call. We appreciate you for sharing this time with us. We know that as a country that we are grieving, but we also know that we have hope. And that's what I believe Dr. George Washington Carver shares with us, that even in the midst of the challenges that he faced, he still had hope, and he knew how to get in touch with the higher power to be able to get the answers that he needed for the challenges that he was facing. So I hope that we will do the same. finally, I want to close by recognizing our youth, our Stewart youth. They are doing some great things. We want to recognize one who was not on here at the beginning of the program, Shadia Roseman. Shadia doesn't know that I am going to recognize her today, but I think it's really important. We've heard from Dr. Butler, we've heard about George Washington Carver, we've heard from Chauncey and from Moody Black, and we know they're doing great things. But we have some young people who are doing some amazing things as well. So Shadia Roseman worked to bring an African-American history class to Legacy Charter School last year. She is a great example of a young person who saw a need in her community and at her school. It was not being offered, even though she goes to, I believe, Legacy Charter School is a predominantly African-American school, but they did not have the true well-rounded education that many of us missed when we were in school, by being able to be exposed to the great achievements and all of the many things that African Americans have contributed to our country and to the world. So she was able to put together a proposal, do her research, and as a result of her proposal, Shadia's school, her alma mater, because she actually graduated this year, now has an African American history class. And the very cool thing about that is that Chauncey Beatty is actually the African American history teacher now. So they are really, really in a great place right now to have such a wonderful gift by way of Chauncey Beatty, as well as to have that legacy of what Shadia Roseman was able to do. So we want to congratulate her for the work that she did at her school. So I hope that you'll be inspired by Shadia. When you see something that you know that you have the power within you to do something about it, I hope that you'll also be inspired by the stories of past men and women like George Washington Carver, and the modern day examples of Dr. Grady Butler, Chauncey Beatty, Moody Black. And also, I hope that you will encourage your youth to get involved, because they do have lots of power. They have a purpose, and we want to help come beside them so that they can actually live out all of the many things that God has placed inside of us. Thank you so much for joining us.